Hi, John. John Rollinson. Really looking forward to talking to you. I've been told by Frank that you're into craniosacral therapy, and my mum was into it big time a long time back. I don't know much about it, but I'm sure you've got some interesting stuff to tell us. But before we launch into your speciality, tell us a little bit about your background, where you're coming from, your relationship to anthroposophy or Mystech, whatever you like.
Yeah, sure. Well, I met Frank when we lived across the hall from each other at Heimoing School, which
Mm-hmm.
is across the street from where the conference is going to be. And after leaving Heimoing, I went and studied furniture design
Mm-hmm.
in, in Rhode Island. And then not long after that, I moved to England to go to Emerson College, and that was the beginning of my journey of discovery, I guess. And from there, I went to the Eurythmy School near Bonn, Germany,
Mm-hmm.
and midway through that, transferred to the London School of Eurythmy, which was in East Grinstead at the time, which was my real artistic home. So, so that was where I sort of, reached I guess my potential for the moment when I was about 28, graduating there, and then I was in the touring ensemble for 3 years before coming back to the U.S. to become a Waldorf teacher, and yeah, to be able to give something back after all of that study and learning and all the
So you
yeah the
did the
great.
Waldorf training in the US, or had you already done that in the UK?
Yeah, I also did the teaching certificate at Emerson after I had been a graduate for a while.
Yeah, cool.
So
So you were away in Europe for, if I understood you correctly, around about 10 years, and then you come back to the States and start teaching. And you continue to work actively with eurythmy and like reading Steiner and spiritual science. And
right.
where does it go from there?
Well, by the time I returned to the U.S., that was the culmination of about 10 years of full-time study of anthroposophy.
Mhm.
Then when you hit the ground, you realize that that's not always quite enough.
You got to contend with the other side.
Well, you've got children who don't want to do what you're asking them to do, and then you've got colleagues that um, maybe appreciate you, but everybody's different. So
Yeah.
you start to get into a bit more of the real learning of what happens when people cross paths.
Yeah.
And I guess that's been the basis of the 25 years since that time, where um, you have to start to look at what does it mean when people cross paths,
Mhm.
right? What is it so simple as we think, right? And what I found, for example, was that we're generally taught to put things in order, cause
Mhm.
and effect, right? This happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, right? Sort of like you've got a book on the table, you've got a glass, and you've got a pencil, and there they are next to one another, and you can see where they are. But what eventually became clear was that the so say my children being born where they could go to school here in Massachusetts, that was the cause. And the effect was me traveling to Germany to meet their mother.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. And so that gradually became the basis for working with people therapeutically, where you can't just look at, well, you certainly can't just look at the symptoms, but you also just can't look at the cause. Well, this happened, and so you got this injury, or that happened, and you became ill. Or maybe there was some deep event in your early childhood which developed into a psychology, which developed into some kind of a condition or an illness. It's just, it's just much more than that, really.
Mm-hmm.
So we're always asking the question, why are you here?
And then help me connect that to what you were saying about like people crossing paths. You were building the idea of conflict there, and there's this why are we here question, and where does this take you on your path?
Yeah, well, we generally don't like it too much when things aren't going well, especially in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And if if we're in a relationship with someone and it's destructive, it's unpleasant, it's stressful, right? That's the main thing. Relationships seem sometimes to cause more stress than they avoid.
Mm-hmm.
And then popular psychology tells you, well, cut that person loose. You don't need that in your life.
Yeah.
And, you know, that is appropriate sometimes, but really we want to always be asking ourselves the question, why have we crossed paths?
Yeah.
And often the most difficult relationships, the most difficult people, those are the friends in disguise. So if you think about why someone is born into a family, why would a handicapped child choose to be born into a family of people? And then you have to, if you're not going to just call everything random, chance, and bad luck,
Yeah.
you have to get some sense, and I think you really can if you look at things with an open mind, that this child made a sacrifice to be born into your family with some kind of handicap as a way of helping you, of paying you back, even that the gift they're giving you is not an easier time. It's the chance to draw out deeper forces of compassion and love from yourself.
And so thinking about children with Down syndrome and this type of thing, but so you start working. Do you start working? Is this a Camp Hill community? Are you start moving into that field, having trained to be a Waldorf teacher, or are these two lives going on at the same time for a while?
Well, I haven't ever lived in a Camp Hill. I've spent a lot of time in Camp Hills.
Mm.
And after my career as a teacher, I started moving into therapy. And then what I learned from working in therapy began to weave together with what I had learned from eurythmy and from anthroposophy. And it's always changing, and it certainly takes time to get any good at anything. But that's where it's led me, is that even with the most holistic, natural, gentle type of therapy, you're not really working in the homeopathic or holistic impulse if you're not looking all the way back for the root causes, which are sometimes in the future.
Mm-hmm. Or the karmic as well.
Exactly.
So to like take that into consideration as well. So are you still working as a teacher, or are you 100% working as a therapist now? I'm still not 100% sure.
Yeah, I teach blocks of eurythmy classes when I can,
Mm-hmm.
and still maybe the most rewarding thing that I do.
Mm-hmm.
I love to work with kindergarten children. It's there's kind of nothing more beautiful when they just come into it 100%, and they're living in the picture that you're trying to build for them, and then it's all the thanks you'll ever need.
It's so interesting what you say. I work as a teacher as well, but I'm a Spanish teacher, and my youngest pupils are 11 years old, and they're still kids. They're proper kids, 10, 11 years old. And then by the time you get to what's called year 7 here in Sweden, it's that they transform. They start to become these young teenagers, and it's so amazing. It's like seeing this profound change that's happening in them. So I can really resonate with what you're talking about with working with a lot younger kids, where so if you can create the right feeling atmosphere around it, how there's this complete, so yeah, take us with you, we'll go with you wherever you want us to go. And it's beautiful to watch. So if I've understood correctly, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here. So you also work with craniosacral therapy. So how did that get into the mix? How does that link into Steiner, anthroposophy, eurythmy?
Well, craniosacral was developed primarily by an osteopathic doctor named John Rollinson, starting in the 1980s, and he was a remarkable human being. I got to work with him a fair amount while he was still alive, and something just grew out of his initial studies and the initial teachings that he offered in courses. And what I soon found was that the paradigm of upledger craniosacral therapy and eurythmy and anthroposophy were completely compatible.
Mm-hmm.
Because what upledger always said was, well, this is what you do. You listen and observe what's going on. You trust the information that's coming to you through your hands, and then you treat what you find. So, in other words, don't expect anything in particular. Expect the unexpected, and don't get hung up on a protocol for treatment. So, if you see these signs and symptoms, then it's probably this or this, and then you
Cause effect. Yeah.
Right. And that is in medicine, those are two poles that are always fighting, where the one that wants to be able to function as precisely as possible in as machine-like a way as possible, and the other that's still, what are my observations in this specific patient? What is my sense of things, my intuition?
Yeah.
And you can.
So if I'm thinking about like stories from the Bible, but also these faith healers, or just hands-on. It's like curing by putting your hands on people, and letting the pure idea being that you are just a medium through which the healing forces can it's like work within the person. How is that the same, or is that different? And if it's different, how is it different from the craniosacral work that you're talking about?
That's an excellent question. The field of Reiki is more or less precisely that, where you become transparent enough that the healing forces or fields of the universe can flow through you and do the work for the person. And that is sometimes really great. With craniosacral and with anthroposophic medical therapeutic fields, there's more of a conscious presence with the process. So we have to learn a lot about physiology and anatomy. And so you have a pretty good idea of what's going on. And the similarity is that you're still not trying to intervene in the sense of, oh, I see a problem, I'm gonna fix that, right? Which you might do with some other techniques. So you're getting as good and as deep an idea of what's going on, and then as you peel the layers off the onion, you can go back to cause and deeper cause and deepest cause. And then, of course, the more information you have, it's always the better. And then you're supporting the person's how shall we say, their life ideal, the archetype of the physical body and everything that forms it and gives it life. So we're supporting that archetype to take hold more deeply where it has been forced to withdraw for whatever reason.
And more consciously than in the Reiki process. So thinking about the conference, just briefly, because we want people also to come to the conference to see you. What is it you're going to be talking about at the conference?
Well, I want to give a little bit of a real world picture of how the process of healing and of therapeutic work actually goes forward in the more ultimate sense, for one thing. So when you're a teacher, what is developed in you works into what is still growing in the child, right? So if you have one certain level of control over your own feelings and emotions, for example, and you get to that year 7 where the soul has just been born.
Yeah.
Right. Before that, the feelings of the child were, well, more or less the feelings of the parents. But then something happens where the child's own feelings are now their own. And, well, we want to avoid as much chaos as we can, I guess, for the next 7 years. But if the teacher or the parent is standing there and has mastered themselves, right? So they hear an unkind word and they're like, yeah, I understand. That is something that it teaches the emerging child in a way that no amount of information can.
And think it's so important. What you're saying there is deeply important. Yeah, we'll have to talk about it some other time. But I really appreciate you taking the time and coming and telling us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about. I won't be, because I'm here in Sweden. I'll be following the conference online, but I'm really looking forward to listening to how you develop that. And I hope also the audience is going to be able to ask questions as well, because there's some really interesting stuff that you were saying there.
Yeah. And I
So
hope we'll be able to weave some of the stained glass windows from the Goetheanum into that and take a look at what we're seeing in current events and in the world and the culture as far as impulses and trends that we're being forced to try to overcome, enable for those different levels of ourselves to be able to unfold. And I think that we can gain even more clarity by making some of those observations.
Wonderful place to stop. Thanks very much for coming and talking to us, John. Look forward to following you at the conference. I'll just press end record there.